Hello. I recently received a TikTok and it was a little bit concerning, and I could see how it would concern other people regarding trans indoctrination in California public schools. So I decided to make a presentation to investigate whether this indoctrination is truly happening. So the video I got was in a TikTok form, but here I have the full video.
Using, including pansexual, which is not, a term that 11
transgender. Transgenderism. What happened in your own daughter's life that she started to get interested or became introduced to the idea of being transgender?
So I'm just going to play her 1 minute of her story where she goes over her experience, and then we'll get into more details.
Well, it really started for my daughter in 7th grade when she went to her comprehensive sex ed class at her public school. And unbeknownst to me, a third party comes in and teaches these kids for 5 hours. So an hour each day. And 1 hour was dedicated to gender identity with the genderbread man and all of the kind of pictorials of you could have a female body and a male brain. And so the seed was planted after that class. And in fact, all of her friends, there were 5, sat in my front yard saying what their new labels were. And none of them chose, the boring cis, which is a made-up term in and of itself, but they all picked something on the alphabet because it's not cool to be, a boring white girl. That's how I took it. And I was, alarmed by the language that they were using, including pansexual, which is not, a term that 11-year-olds should know. And in fact, I didn't know what it meant, and I had to look it up. So that was kind of the first entry point for what happened to her.
So that sounds pretty immediate. I mean, she has.
Yeah, so that's the story. So in a gist, this mom had a perfectly normal daughter. Apparently, all it took was 1 hour, and her daughter was brainwashed and set on a course to become transgender. So let's see. One thing I noticed was that the site was the Daily Signal. So just one quick thing I noticed I wanted to add in here was when I use my regular browser, regular Chrome with cookies, and all, it says, "Do you believe the American dream is becoming more and more out of reach, especially for future generations?" Fine. And then when I went to the site using an incognito browser, it says, "Do you believe the radical left is putting the American dream in jeopardy with socialist ideologies like critical race theory?" Which is just a huge shift in tone, and I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I feel like the survey doesn't make sense because critical race theory, it's talking about like the Black experience in America, I'm sure, and how they contributed to the society. I don't see how suddenly I can't accomplish the American dream just because it's taught in school. But, to each their own. So there's several parties to this video coming together. So first off, we got the Daily Signal, which is part of the Heritage Foundation. And the Heritage Foundation, it's a conservative, think tank that's been around for a long time, several decades. Now that mom is either like the leader or a prominent member of the group Our Duty, and she's going on the Daily Signal. So now Our Duty, you'll notice ROGD research has an impact on Our Duty, and you might be wondering, what does ROGD mean? And it's rapid onset gender dysphoria. So looking at Our Duty's website, they say their primary goal is to facilitate peer support for parents of children with what has been called ROGD and we call transgender ideation. Okay, so here I have the link. So I looked up ROGD. I looked for what does it mean? And here was like a research article that I found on it, published by Lisa Lippman. Parent reports of adolescents and young adults perceived to show signs of rapid onset of gender dysphoria. Okay, so here we see On purpose online forums, parents have reported their children seem to experience a sudden or rapid onset of gender dysphoria, right? Where you're suddenly just really upset with with your birth gender. You go into a dysphoria, opposite of a euphoria. And, the parents describe that onset of the dysphoria occurs in the context of belonging to a peer group where one or multiple or even all friends have become gender dysphoric. So it kind of seems like this gender dysphoria is kind of a social issue where if your social circle has transgender people, you'll become, you know, infected, so to speak, and also become dysphoric. Purpose of this study was to collect data about parents' observations, experience, and perspectives um, when their adolescent and young adult children showed signs of apparent, sudden, or rapid onset gender dysphoria. So here we see how they did it. They sent a link to a 90-question survey, multiple choice Likert type open-ended questions, and it was placed on three websites. And here you see the three websites they use: Fourth Wave Now, Transgender Trend, and the Youth Trans Critical Professionals. And participants were encouraged to share recruitment info and link to the survey uh, for anywhere they thought they might find eligible participants to expand the research of the project through the snowball sampling technique. Okay, so let's go a little into the kind of summary points we have. Okay, so what did they find? So first, 256 parents were eligible and qualified. They met the survey criteria, and here are just a couple quick summary statistics. 41% of the adolescents and young adults had expressed a non-heterosexual orientation before identifying as trans. 62.5% of the children of the parents who, completed the survey had been diagnosed with at least one mental health disorder or neurodevelopmental disability. Very interesting. 36.8% of the friend groups, uh, the parents say that a majority of the members of said group become trans identified. So that, you see that and you're like, whoa, 1/3 of friend groups with at least one trans person became a majority trans group. Very interesting. And keep in mind this is the parents replying on how their child's changed or their experience with their child. 47% reported declines in mental health in their kids. 57% described a deteriorating relationship with their children after the child came out, or I shouldn't say child, the AYA, adolescent and young adult. 25% stopped spending time with non-trans friends. Almost 50% isolated themselves from their families or tried. 46.6%, again, almost 50, only trusted information from transgender sources when it came to gender dysphoria. And 86.7% reported their child had an increase in their social media/internet use. And belonged to a friend group in which one or multiple friends became trans-identified during the same time frame, or both. So actually, that's kind of a weird statistic. It's one, two, or both. Okay. So based on all the summary statistics, they posited some hypotheses. The first one is social influences can contribute to the development of gender dysphoria. So it continues, it is unlikely that friends and the internet can make people trans. However, it is possible that the following can be initiated, magnified, spread, and maintained via mechanisms of social and peer contagion. And they have a second hypothesis that maladaptive coping mechanisms may underlie the development of gender dysphoria for some AYAs. So they're saying for some individuals, the drive to transition, so the drive to become trans, may represent a coping mechanism to avoid feeling strong or negative emotions, similar to how the drive to extreme weight loss can serve as a coping mechanism in anorexia. So that's a very interesting study. Um, you know, Interesting hypothesis posited. It could be like we've got the social contagion hypothesis, we've got the coping mechanism, the 90s was anorexia, the 2020s are being trans. They're just maladaptive coping mechanisms. So I'm gonna cut the video here, part one, and part two will be uploaded shortly afterwards. And here we go into some detail where we really analyze the Littman study.